I agree on the whole. I guess this is where it comes to the art of engagement, nuance, and taking like productive stances. Because I do think I have to differ with you with respect to like the ADA examples because I think they're making fools of this is like the parallel to the carnivore person saying sugar causes cancer, vaccines make your head explode,
Mhm,
and
yeah.
blah 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 blah. And then by association, you get tainted. So, like a medical body that is recommending apple crisps and pancakes and syrup, they're tainting themselves. This is on them for them to step up and rationalize why they're doing this or improve. I don't see it as productive. I see it as harmful. I think that's the prevailing opinion among physicians I talk to.
Hmm.
And I think it's actually very appropriate to, in effect, especially as someone who is a medical trainee, throw them under the bus, so to speak. And I'll tell you, part of the reason I'm willing to do that is because I know it'll get traction, and there's productivity in that it builds social capital for later expense, if that makes sense.
It does, but it feels like it's just doing the same thing that they did then. And at what point then are we just perpetuating that pendulum where, like, my assumption is like, I don't think the ADA, the people who are designing this are out to lunch. I think they're thinking, how do we get that social capital just like some other people are thinking that. And I think that what ends up happening is you get like the majority in the middle of that where they're just like, well, where is the actual like truth to this and or where are the half truths and the full truths and that sort of thing. So that they're actually most people, I think they're just looking for like all the potential inputs and how it's going to play out for them if they go about this piece of advice. And I think most people come to this thinking to some degree they're going to get half the story from one side and the other half from the other, and it's going to balance out. And my hope is like, how do we get to a point where both sides are more willing to say, like, here are the advantages of our approach, here are the disadvantages. And then the other side says, here are our advantages, here are our disadvantages. And it's not such a canyon sized chasm between the two that a person can look at it and be like, okay, well, I know myself. And if I go this way, I can deal with the potential downsides of that particular approach because I know it's sustainable for me to say abstain from some of that stuff. Whereas the other person can look at it, they're like, they maybe look at the other side where they're like, the downside of this approach is very small for me personally versus the upside. And that's just a really hard proposition for a person to expect to get given that kind of like more sensational like side of the storytelling. And I mean, to be fair, Nick, I think you actually probably do as good a job of this as any, where you your online rhetoric is very much well balanced in the sense that I know you're a fan of the ketogenic diet and I know that is something you're really interested in. So I have an assumption about you that you're going to probably be much more excited about that way of eating than other ones. So I know that, and I know that the information you're going to provide is likely going to be more in line with that because it's what you're interested in. But I also know that you're not going to blatantly say, you're not going to withhold information from me for the sake of promoting it, and you're also not going to put out information that you know is false to try to get more engagement. And I don't see that from some of the like really big names in the low carb movement. I see the exact opposite. I see them thinking, I know how I'm going to get engagement, and it's going to be by withholding this and sharing that. And they just put it on rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse
Yeah.
and repeat. So for me, that puts me in a position where I find myself playing devil's advocate of things where I think in practice, I probably wouldn't actually do. And I get stubborn about like, well, I'm not going to answer, like, then this was the example. People wanted me to answer this question about how would I recommend the ADA to my family member? And I'm like, we can get to that topic. It's a fun topic. But first, you're going to answer my initial question. And they wouldn't answer it because they knew what it would say. And like that was me trying to get to a level where we've got all the cards out on the table about the ADA. Now we can get to criticizing because we've done our justice, our we've done our due justice in or I'm sorry, our due diligence in like laying out like what the landscape actually is when it comes to what they're recommending. Because a passerby, if I would have just joined in on the absolute view, would have came by and thought like, oh well, I guess the ADA is recommending that, as one person put it, gorging on pastries all day, which obviously they don't advocate. Um, so I mean, like I find that to be kind of that's where I guess I was more or less being stubborn about, is like I felt like, or maybe if I back way up beyond just that particular thread, I just think like the rhetoric as a whole within the low carb ketogenic carnivore diet has shifted enough towards where we're holding back on stuff that, or we're holding back on sharing things that are potentially negative about this approach, or things people should consider about it so that they navigate it properly, and getting really heavy on the potential positives. And I don't see that being a sustainable move for the diet as a whole. I think it's probably going to hurt it long term, if anything.